Hi and welcome to today's video podcast, Business Made Simple, with me, Hayley Kosolu. Today joining me is Abby Abrames from Valley Marketing, who's going to talk to us all about top tips for marketing your small business. Hello, thank you for joining me today. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so as you said, got my own small consultancy called Valley Marketing. I have only ever done advertising and marketing for my entire life, so let's hope that, I've got some coherent advice to give everybody. So run my own agency for about 10 years, but previous to that, I've worked in-house as marketing managers for other agencies in the UK, Europe and in the Middle East. And then I started out live working at the Sheffield Star newspaper selling advertising. So I've got quite a good breadth of understanding of sort of advertising and marketing. So hopefully today will be useful for somebody.
Super. So obviously a lot of our listeners are small businesses and a lot of them have got quite small budgets when it comes to marketing, especially in those first few years. What would your recommendation be for a business that's got a smaller budget but really wants some help and support with the marketing of their business?
So if you've got a small budget, you can manage it yourself. In terms of digital marketing in particular, there is so much support to get yourself up and running. Even if you're looking at things like Google pay-per-click or Facebook ads, those kind of things, there is a really nice, easy step-by-step guide. And you don't need a massive budget to start those. So if you're a small business, you're likely to also have quite a local customer base. So trial a budget of £30 on Facebook for a week in a very small area. And if that works, you expand it to another area, because actually £30 with no return is a risk that we can all take. But if you go full pelt right out the door and you're like, okay, there's £1,000 on a Facebook campaign, and a month down the line it's done nothing, that is probably not affordable for most businesses, let alone sort of like smaller businesses they start out. So my advice is always localise it and start really small. And if that works, you can expand because it's working, so therefore you've got the money.
What would you say to businesses who are sort of on every single sort of social media platform and put themselves under that pressure to sort of perform on all of those platforms?
If you want to do it, if that's really your thing, I meet some people that are just, cut them down the middle and they are social media through and through. They totally buy into it. They believe it's their platform and they are on all of them. And they're managing them all through their individual platform themselves. So it's hugely time consuming. So, I speak to them and, some people might be spending like 12 hours a week creating reels and posts for social media, and they are on every platform. But when you actually look at the return it gives them, that 12 hours a week would be better spent doing something else. But if you really feel a desperate need to be across all platforms, use a scheduler to do it for you rather than having to create it for each individual platform. And don't do it on your phone. Do it on a computer, a desktop, a laptop, because it's easier, it's more effective. But I would say maybe limit that to, if you're a small business, maybe limit your social media drive to maybe a couple of hours a week, tops. Because if you're spending 8, 10, 12 hours a week and your goal's not to be an influencer, but just to promote your products, it's the wrong way to sort of like market your business through social media.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are on all the platforms, but actually their target audience will hang out on maybe one or two of those platforms.
So if you think of TikTok being, if we look at the big four, if you like, and I'm not going to include WhatsApp on it, despite the fact that a lot of people use it in a similar sort of like way as social media. TikTok is young. It's young, it's fast moving, and not a lot of people who are affluent are on TikTok. You then move to sort of Instagram, and this is a very big generalisation, but you're talking up to sort of like 35, a little bit more money, sort of like maybe business professionals. Then over 35, you move into the Facebook, and that's a very B2C sort of journey. But you also have to think about it from a bigger picture, because like my sister will call me and say, when I was looking for a house, she was like, I've just seen this on Instagram, and she sends that to me. Her daughters will say, Mum, we've seen this on TikTok. So there is a sort of like a continuity to have the idea across them all. But if your target market is 55, it's not likely that they're on TikTok. It just isn't. So if you know Facebook works for you, and you don't have the time for TikTok, then don't waste your energy there. Go and have the conversation wherever your customers are. And then obviously there's LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is not really age specific, but it's a professional platform. So it's, if you're wanting to contact people from a professional perspective, it's a B2B platform, LinkedIn would be the place to go for that.
Yeah, I think as well, it depends where people are hanging out at that time of the day. So a lot of, business to business people may be on LinkedIn during the day from a work perspective, but then they get home at night, they might be scrolling on Facebook, to pass the time, or they might have got into a doom scrolling, as they say. And
if you're smart with it as well, you connect it all together. So you have your social media platforms pixels built into your website. So if they visited your website in the day, that Big Brother experience that, that advert pops up on Facebook in the evening, that's a really coherent way to make it work across the multiple platforms, rather than you having to think about, I need to do a post at 7 o'clock, I need to do a post at 3 o'clock, I need to do a post at 10 p.m. That just becomes quite exhausting.
Yeah, okay. So content is king is a pretty bold statement that a lot of people use, and I see and hear a lot around on social media about posting more, so 2, 3, 4 times a day. Then you sort of read other posts that are saying less is more, and it's about quality over the quantity. What would your advice be to a small business owner that is not really sure whether it's about volume or quality?
It's never about volume, like absolutely never about volume, because you're just spamming people. And the thing is, if somebody likes what you do, your social media posts will come on their feed because they've seen it, they like it, they're watching the whole reel, they're reading the whole post. The algorithms know that you're doing that, so then you'll get fed those posts. If you're feeding 12 posts a day to Instagram, or 12 reels a day, and those 12 reels are coming up on my feed, because I am going to be like, whoa, come on, this is too much, it's not necessary. It's about the conversation. Have you got a need to post 12 times a day, or are you just telling people what you've had for breakfast, and then the fact that you went, out for a coffee, and then you took your dog for a walk, and then you picked the kids up? If that's your goal, fine. But if you're trying to promote your business, be savvier about your time. My recommendation to all small businesses, 2 to 3 posts a week is absolutely fine place to start building that audience, start building a message and continuity, and create a bit of variety. There's no point every post is just like, here's my product, come and buy it. That's not going to drive anybody's interest. That's not how to use those platforms. Be part of the conversations that are going on, tell your story, absolutely, your service, your products, sell those as well, but it needs to be a more coherent sort of like approach to social media, to your content. Have a think about it, spend a little bit of time looking at what others are doing in your sector that works well. There's no point in, you're not reinventing the wheel, you're trying to attract more customers. So think of it from that perspective.
Okay. What do you say to business owners who are trying to do everything? So that, they've got all the website, they've got all the social media platforms, they've got all of the possible marketing outreach platforms you could think of. What would you say to the business owner who's trying to be, let's say, a master of all jack of none?
I mean, if you can do it, if you've got the time, if it's cost effective, if it's working, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. For the majority of people I meet, marketing is so far down their list of priorities of running their business that their approach is, I can do it, so therefore I should. And inherently, it never gets done properly. It never gets done with any kind of real regularity. It never gets done with a consistent approach. And it becomes a bit sort of like, I haven't posted anything on Facebook this week. I didn't send out an email last month. I haven't updated the website this year. So it just, the idea that you can do it doesn't mean that you should. Focus, if you want to manage your marketing, focus on the bits that you can do well and you can do consistently. You don't have to do everything. But if you enjoy doing it and you can see a return on it, that's fine. But you're going to have to outsource some of the other things that you do as a business owner to make it be effective.
Yeah, I think as well, when you're sort of a small business owner, a lot of, in the early years, you fall into that trap of, you go out, you do the networking and the marketing, and then you start getting work in. So then you focus all your time on actually delivering that product or that service. And then you get to the end of maybe the contract or the service provision, and then it's like, oh crumbs, I've not been doing any marketing while I've been focused on delivery. Then they pick up that marketing again, and then it's sort of, they create almost this feast and famine cycle because they've not got that consistency consistency of output with marketing. What would you say is the easiest way to sort of create that consistency without a huge amount of time allocation, especially when you're the person delivering the service or the product on a day-to-day basis?
First thing in the morning, before you start work. So before you've checked your emails. So loads of us work from home, small business owners kind of like have this habit of never switching off, don't you? You might, because communication now is no longer just on a work email. People do WhatsApp you or send you messages on Facebook or leave you voice notes. This whole sphere means that we are endlessly contactable. Does mean that it can be quite difficult to compartmentalise your time between work and life and everything else that goes on. And I'm absolutely my own worst enemy for it. But if I know I need to do something and it has got to be done, and I know that if something else comes up, I'm going to get distracted, I put my laptop on Do Not Disturb and I focus the first job that I do in the morning on that task and that task only. And only when that is done do I basically go to work. Then I start. So I recommend that with your marketing. And it doesn't need to be massive amounts of time. And if you do want to do it every day, it can be done in 5-10 minutes in the morning. Okay, let's schedule up 3 posts. Let's look at some blog content. Let's sort of have a look at what Google is saying is trending at the moment. You're talking minutes in a day, but it is a marketing task that you have done. But do it before you do anything else, because if you go, I'm going to do it as soon as I get into the office, and then you get into the office and the toilet's leaking, it's not getting done. Or you get into the office and somebody's called in sick, it's just not getting done. So always do it before you start anything else. That's my way of being consistent.
Okay, that's a really good tip actually. And I think as well, it's finding that time where you're most sort of in that creative mind. Yeah. I myself, I'm not a massively creative person, as you well know, but I tend to find that actually if you've got that sort of that consistency, I prefer generally to do things like that of an evening because I've got more headspace, there's no kids running around because they're tucked nice and safely into bed, so that's when I find I'm most productive and most creative. But again, different people, different circumstances, but having that sort of time slot every day, that's really useful. Okay, so a lot of people do post a lot of stuff on social media but find that they're not getting a lot of traction, whether it's people not seeing their posts or they're not actually getting any interaction on their posts, or they're not sort of making the sale. What would your advice be around sort of how they can get more out of the social media that they are using?
I think it absolutely depends on what you're selling, what your business is, to how people are going to respond to your social media activity. That people will get hung up on posting. And it's not always about the posting. So I do work with quite a lot of like small family-run businesses. So for example, let's say it's a ladies' boutique clothes shop, and she'll be like, I'm doing a reel every day, and then she gets a new item of clothing and she puts that up, and she's like, it's my regular customers, it's the same people that are coming in, and it's her family and friends that are liking it, which is great, but it's not new customers. So I started talking to her about there's all of these Facebook groups out there, because you're selling online, so there are groups for independent boutique fashion shops for targeting the over 40s. Go and have the conversation in that group. Tell this active group of people that are looking for what you have, tell them that you have it. But we're not talking about spamming them with posts. When somebody asks a question, answer it. And that's exactly how I use social media. Somebody asks a question about marketing and I answer it. And I answer it with advice, with some free tools. And that's the majority of the way that through social media I get new contacts. Not through going, hi, I do marketing, do you want my services? People know what marketing is, they know what it entails. Those posts won't generate something for me, but by being useful to individuals who have a question is a much better way for me to use social media. So it's never always about, I need to do a post, I need to do a story, I need to do a reel. Social media is a much bigger outfit than that, and you need to utilise it in the best way that supports your customers.
I think as well it's about sort of that educational piece, those little hints and tips, those little things that people maybe are thinking about when they're scrolling through their phone at sort of 10 o'clock at night because they can't sleep or whatever it is. So for me, I find that that those little educational elements, or solving the problem, thinking about what does your business or product solve, and how can you best help people.
Yeah, definitely. If you can be useful, that's the best approach to take to social media.
Yeah, super. Okay, so moving on then to Google, which is quite an interesting topic for many different reasons, especially now all the algorithms and the AI chatbots have all come into play. How can people utilise Google to promote their business and get more out of the platform?
I mean, I am a self-confessed Google geek. I absolutely adore it. If it could be the only thing I ever did, it would be. And it's because it knows you and it knows your customers, and it's hugely big brother, but for me in like a really positive way. So the majority of people in the UK, their first point of search is via Google. So obviously we've got AI and you've got chat and Claude and all of the rest of them that people do utilise as a tool. But initially that first search is through Google. But Google is so much more than just Google search. You've got YouTube and Google Business, and then all the back-end tools like Google Console and Google Trends and Google Analytics. And all of these things will feed into each other. They will all have their own internal conversation, then actually spit out loads of data to you. So I have clients that don't use Google Ads, that don't use that budget in terms of paying for that system, but we use all of the tools that sit in the back end of Google Ads to try and understand what people are searching for, what are people asking for, what is trending, what is right for the UK, what is right on a global basis, what is right for a Sheffield basis, what is right for a London basis. All of that information is inside Google. And the more of those tools that you use, the bigger the impact that you can have when somebody is looking for your business. And it is really about playing around with those. Again, with small budgets, you can run a Google Ads campaign with £100. But the data you can get from that, so you understand that actually most people are responding to your ads at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. Oh, okay, so that's when I'm going to start putting out my social media posts. More people were making inquiries at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. That's when I'm going to send out my email. People were asking specifically about this. I'm going to do a social media post about that. I'm going to do a reel about that. I'm going to update my frequently asked questions on the website. That's how you get the most value out of Google. £100 in a Google Ads campaign can give you so much data that you can use across everything else that you do. Even to, if you're doing an exhibition, that could be the main question that's on your pull-up banner, because you know that that's what people are asking Google for. So it relates to people. As soon as they walk past your exhibition stand, they're like, yeah, I do ask that question. And that's how you use Google to build the conversation around what you're trying to sell.
Yeah, I think as well it goes back to sort of what we said before, what problem do you solve? Yeah. And actually, if people are searching that into Google of, how do I solve this particular problem in my business or in my life, and your product or your service can then solve that problem, it's a shoe-in, really. Yeah,
and there's some really cool tools so Google Trends will also sit you alongside other brands and products that you might not have thought about. So like one of the most popular search terms on a Friday night is cocktail recipes, new cocktail recipes. And then on a Saturday morning, it's the hangover cure. So it's those two intrinsically aren't related, but the buyer or the journey of the customer is. So Google Trends will give you that information. So you might think I'm completely unrelated to another brand or another service, but actually it will show you where they tie together. So you can write the blog on that, you can write the email, you can have the conversation, and they're just really useful tools to. You can probably tell. I think Google's amazing. I'd kind of like think back to when I worked for the Sheffield Star. I was like, I don't know how we ever convinced anybody to do anything, because we had no real data behind it other than the fact that we sell 100,000 copies a week. That was it. That was the whole data that we had. Well, now there's so much data, there's so much information about who is utilising those tools that you can really target what you do.
I think as well, like a lot of people think in order to be sort of good at marketing, you've got to have that sort of that creative vision. Actually, there's a lot of people that can do the creativity, but actually if you're more interested in the data, you could actually have a huge impact on how effective your marketing is if you look at that information.
Yeah, I would say data first and creativity next, because you can have the most beautiful, gorgeous, inspiring piece of creative, but if you're targeting the wrong person with that, it's a complete waste of time. So find the target, find out where they are, using all of the tools that are there, and then think about how the creative will work with that person.
Yeah, I think as well it goes back to sort of those basic sort of marketing 101 of understanding what your USP is, what problems you're solving, what you are offering, who your target audience is. And I find a lot of business owners that actually don't know who their target audience is. And what I tend to do with them, obviously I don't do the marketing element of it, but alongside the data, you know, I can pretty much tell if you're looking at an existing client that's relatively well established, looking at who they work with currently, getting some data around, you know, where are they based? What field of expertise do they have? You know, what industry do they specialise in? What are their age categories? Are they predominantly male or female? Or, you know, what kind of demographic do they fit into? And that data is so important because that sort of underpins all of the marketing decisions that you then make around how you can get potentially more of the same, unless of course you don't enjoy working with those types of people and maybe you want to
move away.
Avoid which, you know, is a fact of I think a lot of businesses in the early years will just take anything, right? They'll take
absolutely. You
any
take on
inquiry.
all the wrong jobs, all the wrong projects because it's income.
Yeah.
And we've all done that.
Absolutely.
You know, because you have to, you know, and you probably haven't quite found your niche yet, but actually use that experience as the way to move yourself into a position where you are able to really share what you do or your product or your service to the right people. You know, we've all been there. We've all worked with the wrong people. We've all done the wrong projects and made no money and made all the mistakes, but it's the learning from that makes the difference going forward. And you should treat marketing the same way. I kind of talk to my clients about this 80-20 rule. 80% of your budget should be spent on things, time or money, that you feel really quite sure are going to have a benefit. But you should always have this 20% of like, not sure, but let's give it a go. Let's try it. Because, you know, when TikTok first started, it was dismissed by a lot of people. Now it's found its core audience. It knows what they are looking for. And businesses and platforms are able to respond to that properly. But lots of people did just dismiss it. And actually, if your target market is on TikTok, you need to get yourself on TikTok. If your target market is on Instagram, you need to get on Instagram. But when the next new TikTok, the next new WhatsApp comes out, don't dismiss it, but look to see whether, you know, how is this going to work? Have I got £30 to give this a go? And that's how, if you're a really small business, think about it. I always like to sort of say, if you're going to spend £30 on your lunch in the afternoon or a couple of drinks, that is money that you could look at spending on a Facebook ads campaign or whatever that might be.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on niche there. A lot of business owners are reluctant to sort of have a definitive niche of sort of area of focus, mainly because they feel like they're going to sort of exclude other potential wannabe customers. What would you say to somebody who is not sure if sort of niching down is the right way to go about the marketing their business?
Most smaller businesses will have a core customer, and that goes for if you're running a corner shop. You will have a core customer that comes into your corner shop. One, they will be local to you. They will have a certain demographic and they're likely to be of a certain age because you're a corner shop. If you're not toothpaste, so toothpaste everybody needs, market that to whoever you like. We're all going to use it from the age of our first teeth turn up to the point where we've all got dentures, we're using toothpaste. If you don't sit in that mindset category, you will have a core customer. So you will be niched anyway. You just don't really want to acknowledge it. You know, that like women's products, you wouldn't market them to men. They're not using them. In the nicest possible way, they're not your core audience. So figure out who they are, because your speciality will be attractive to certain consumers, not to everybody. If you're toothpaste, then, you know, crack on.
Yeah, I think as well, I think it's more rather than sort of looking at a niche as a negative, again, you know, actually a niche can be a really powerful thing, because then you can better communicate your message, you can better communicate to those individual people. And actually, like you said, a sort of a core customer base is a niche. And you can find out a lot of businesses who don't know what their core customer base is or who their niche is, they can find that out just by, again, looking at the data, seeing who they've got an audience with already.
And you might not realise it. You might not realise that you have a core customer base, or your understanding of who your core customer base is might be very, very different to the data that you get. And the perception as well. So I was working recently with, so she's a registered nutritionist. But people never search for that. No. Ever. People will search for stuff on like Holland and Barrett to get to where she is. But understanding that that's what her core customers are looking for when they start out their journey is really important for her to be able to market her services to the people that are just buying vitamins. And so it is understanding that what you do and the perception of what you do are not always the same thing. True.
And again, that goes back to the messaging, doesn't it? Absolutely. It's really, really important. Okay, so moving on then, SEO. Yes. What do you find are the sort of the common myths and misconceptions around SEO? And for people who don't actually know what SEO is, talk to us a little bit about what it is and how it's useful.
So it stands for search engine optimization, but basically what it means is when you ask Google a question or any of your search engines, what comes up first? So inherently, it's the ads. Then you get a core of Google believes that this is what you're looking for, and then it can be location based. So you get the Google business stuff. And it can include anything. So from, Amazon posts to BBC News to your posts to a journalistic white paper. It can be anything because your search term then goes into Google's mass database, and it returns back to you what it thinks you're asking for, but also by who knows who you are, what you've asked for it in the past, where you do live, what you've already been searching for. It will. So it's a big algorithm of stuff. And then with the launch of AI in the last sort of like couple of years being included in search, it's got even bigger. But the biggest myth is that there's some overcomplicated magic solution where X equals 2.75 reoccurring a million times over. And it absolutely isn't. SEO is time, effort, and consistency. SEO is about you understanding what you're wanting to market and who your customers are and continuing to have that conversation online and building credibility. And you can only do that if you put a consistent amount of time into what you're publishing online. So whether that be on your website, on YouTube, on Facebook, whether you've done an interview with the Yorkshire Evening Post and they've posted that. It is about your digital presence and how relevant that is to your core customers. And it is all the time. You can't build a website and then leave it alone for 3 years and expect it to be fabulous, because it won't. Google will index that website and go, well, they've not put anything on it. So there's no reason for us to keep pushing this. It's old, it's probably out of date. Now, if you built a website 5 years ago and you were in marketing and you did nothing to it, AI is now a massive player in the game, and it wasn't 5 years ago. So what you built 5 years ago that you've left doesn't take into account what the average user is doing online now. So it's always be consistent, be updating what you have, and be aware of what is happening sort of in that digital atmosphere or that digital platform, and be part of it. You can't just disappear. You have to be on it all the time. And it is time. It is time, really. You can't cheat that. Lots of people try to. Lots of people get the fake reviews or use the black hat, ideas of like just keyword stuffing every city in the UK so that you can attract. It doesn't work. All of these things. There was a time where you could maybe sort of like get round those kind of like rules, but they don't work anymore. And Google's approach has always been, we want our search results to be useful to the person that's asking us for it. So it's not in Google's interest to return false, misleading, poor quality information, because people will start going, Google's no longer reliable. I'm only now going to ask Bing or Yahoo. So you always have to think about, is this useful? Is it interesting? Is it credible? Is it up to date? And then just keep doing it.
Okay. Super. So just moving back a little bit to sort of Google, Facebook paid ads.
Yeah.
How can a business owner sort of set that up and be potentially a little bit smarter rather than, investing huge amounts of money that potentially they haven't got, especially if they're a small business?
So Google, I don't think you'd get any realistic data from for less than £100 for a month's campaign, and that would need to be quite local. And I would say probably similar £30 on Facebook for a week. If you're going to spend less than that and on shorter periods of time, you're not going to get data. You're not going to get a true element of data. If you did a Facebook ad for one day, it's a very unique day to you. So if that day is like the Friday before payday, that has an impact on people's buying decisions. If it's the Friday, the weekend before everybody gets paid, then that also has an impact on the fact that nobody's buying anything. So play around with it on a local basis and a specific audience. And if you spent £100, you're like, well, I didn't get any sales, I didn't get any inquiries. You look at where the ad went, who clicked on it, whether they bounced off the page. So you might have something wrong with your website, might have been going to the wrong page, it was the wrong audience, but you learn from that and you go, okay, so if we're going to do it again, we now know what not to do. The nice thing with both Facebook and Google now, or Meta and Google now, is it's really easy to do on your own. Now, I should think it's easy, obviously, because I do it, but I do help people to navigate it, set it up themselves and then run it on their own, because they don't have the budget for somebody to do it for. And it's easier than it's ever been. So if you do want to have a go at it, do it. The guides that exist within Google and Meta are so easy and coherent. If you want to do it, do it.
Do it, but do it consistently.
Do it consistently, yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people start out doing marketing themselves because they don't potentially have the budget or, they don't have sort of a good enough understanding of it. But then they do it for a very short period of time, either get bored or don't fully understand it and don't fully commit to it, or they just don't be consistent because they're busy delivering the day to day. And actually that consistency, I see a lot of people that say, oh, but it doesn't work for us. It's like, well, how long did you do it for? And how much effort did you put in? And how much time and consistency? Also,
one of the biggest mistakes that people make is, my £100 didn't work, I'm going to double my budget. Now, Google and Meta will always say, give us a little bit more money because that'll make it work better. That is never, ever my approach, ever. On all of the campaigns that I manage, every single time we do one, they go, give us some more money and we'll make it work better. But the campaign could have been the most successful thing that client's ever done. They don't need to give it more money because it's working absolutely fabulously. The answer is not always doubling the budget, increasing the money that you spend. It's understanding what did or didn't work and then doing it again in a different way. It's not doubling the money, because on Google, you will also be competing against some massive national brands. If you're a plumber and you work in Rotherham, you are also competing against British Gas and HomeServe, and their budgets are insane. They could price you out of the market all day, every day, but that's not what you're competing against. You can find out, you can get a rough guide of like what the cost per click is. But British Gas cost per click budget is probably going to be £50. Yours is not. And it's understanding that, making use of the data and the feedback that you get and making a decision of where you're going to take it next time.
Okay, so what would you say are sort of the biggest marketing myths that you come across that really do cost businesses a lot of money?
And this is not just in marketing, this is across the board in most businesses. Give me £99 and I'm going to create your miracle. It's that old adage, if it sounds too good to be true, it absolutely is. Those £99 subscriptions to anything in marketing are a waste of money. Over the year, that's £1,200. Go on a nice holiday. You will feel much more satisfaction and achievement from that holiday than that. People do it because it's only £99, but it rarely, if ever, gives you any return on that £99. So when anybody sort of says, oh, well, I've seen this and it's only £99, my heart sinks. Because it is that, it's only £99. You can afford to lose £99. But if you run a business over 10 years, you've just spent £12,000 on something that's never worked. I mean, that just feels insane.
Yeah. bit like all those little subscriptions that businesses end up with, and they don't realise until they have to sit down and look at the numbers one day.
And they realise they're spending 500 quid on subscriptions that nobody's using.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've had some questions in from some of our viewers and listeners. So the first one is, why am I posting regularly on social media, but I'm not getting any inquiries from it?
So one, it might be because your audience is never going to contact you through LinkedIn. Doesn't mean they've not seen it. So if you go with the old rule of thumb, which existed long before social media came about, somebody needs to see your brand 6 times to recognise who you are. So if they've met you at an exhibition, and then they've gone on your website, and then you sent them an email, and then you're popping up on their social media because you've got the right pixel set up, this is where the buying decision starts to come into play. So they might never contact you on social media. You might never get a single like for anything you do online. It doesn't mean that it's not worth doing, because you're building your brand presence. You're building that recognition of what you are. So when somebody does need, so for example, if you need your boiler servicing, that's a once a year thing. So you're not searching all the time for it. But if you are on the radar of somebody, so when they do need that boiler servicing, they'll go, oh, I'm going to call Joe Blogg's plumbers because I remember who they are, rather than British Gas. That's what your social media plays the part of. Standalone, it can be very difficult to make it work, but it needs to play a bigger picture in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it is really important to remember those touch points. And, you know, I mean, I've never in all of my years of business won clients from social media, but I think with the power of social media now and the way that people present themselves, it's easy to believe that people are making an absolute fortune through posting on social media. And a lot of it, I find, is smoke and mirrors. There's not many sort of grassroots business owners or businesses that are actually getting all of their inquiries purely through social media alone. A lot of them have got that widespread targeted approach and have that time and those regular touch points.
And if posting genuinely isn't working for you, rather than leave social media completely, start delving into the group, start adding comments, start adding value in another way through the social media platforms. There's 4.5 billion people on Facebook. If you want to ignore them, that's probably quite a big, risky decision to make.
Okay, so second question, should I be focusing more on Google or on social media for my business?
If you're only going to do one, I would always say Google. People go there first and they find it more useful. So people will end up doom scrolling on social media, but it doesn't mean that they've got anything practical or anything useful out of it. It's just this like addictive thing that we end up doing. Whereas Google is used for a purpose. I need something, I'm asking Google to give me the question. Facebook's like, oh, I'll just check out what, we're socially stalking people, aren't we really? And then you just end up spiraling down and 45 minutes later you're still on it. So Google is where you ask the questions. Facebook is where that answer's almost being forced upon you, whether you want it or not.
Okay. How long should I give my marketing before I expect to see real results?
Depends what you're doing. But I mean, SEO, if anybody's telling you something's going to happen with less than sort of 9 to 12 months, they either know something nobody else does or they're blatantly lying to you. But any form of marketing will inherently take time. Going viral is not this really common thing that happens to people. It takes time. You've got to be a massive disruptor in a marketplace to do something with an instant result. If you're doing something that is a commonplace, already known product or service, you've got to be willing to put in time and effort to make that work.
Okay. Is it worth paying for ads, or should I just stick to organic marketing?
I recommend doing both. I recommend small budgets because you can utilise the wins that you find in paid ads and you can use that to increase your organic search.
Okay. What type of content actually works for small businesses? I feel like that's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, that is a broad question. So is it useful? Is anybody talking about it? Is the conversation already happening online? Be part of that. So this comes back to are you a Steve Jobs of the world? Are you creating a product or a service that nobody even knows that they want? The smartphone came out and nobody had an idea what it was, and then all of a sudden everybody needs it. if you're the Steve Jobs of the world, this is a very different conversation. But the majority of people that I work with are working in industries and services that are already very well established. So understand what works by looking at what's going on, and then utilise that to sort of like build your campaigns, really. But yeah, I mean, what works and what doesn't, you're going to find that out over time, aren't you, really?
Just looking at that data, isn't it?
There is no guarantee in marketing, none whatsoever, in anything you do. So whether that's a massive pay-per-click campaign or whatever else it is that you think you're doing, there is no guarantees in marketing.
Okay. Do things like hashtags, posting times and algorithms really make that much of a difference?
Yeah, they can do. Absolutely, they can do. Especially hashtags that are time specific or very, very actively being used. So obviously, we're currently in a situation with the war in the Middle East. Hashtag Iran is a massive hashtag. So if you are part of that conversation, that would be a hashtag that would be worthwhile we were using. But hashtag Iran 12 months ago wouldn't have really brought up anything. So it is using the right hashtags at the right time. But also if you're trying to build your brand, so hashtag IECOS, absolutely, put it on everything that you do, because it will relate to people over time. But yeah, hashtags can make a difference. They don't have quite the same impact that they maybe did sort of like 5 years ago or so. But you've got nothing to lose, have you? Posting times absolutely make a difference. And the platforms that you use will be able to feed you advice of what those times are. So it's when basically people are more active. So yeah, they will make a difference.
Yeah. Okay. Why does my competitor seem to be doing so much better online than me?
I mean, how would you know that? I mean, that's just because I think it's a British thing that, I'm not doing as well as such and such. But maybe they're just better at lying to people than you are. Do you know what I mean? I think that all business owners inherently will struggle. They'll go through peaks and troughs of what they're doing, and they'll find successes and failures. And it is about the journey, isn't it? It's about learning from that and moving that forward. And actually, stop comparing yourself to what your nearest competitor is doing. You have absolutely no idea what they're really doing. You know, I've met loads of people over the years that are massively successful, and and they're buying the private boxes at the race days, and they're on yachts and all the rest of it, and then their businesses fold because actually it wasn't all what everybody thought it. And you see that in massive businesses across the world. So don't worry about what they're doing. If you're good at what you do, there will always be a place for you in that industry, and focus on that.
Yeah, I think it's that sort of old adage of, keeping up with the Joneses, isn't it? Once upon a time, it was a lot easier to keep up with the Joneses because they lived next door. Yeah. And when they got a new car, you would see that they'd got a new car on the drive, but actually you also saw them having a fight in the garden on the Saturday afternoon when, somebody's not done something that they were supposed to do. But on social media, you don't see the fights, you don't see the sort of the bad periods and the bad days. You only see the unicorns and the rainbows and all this stuff.
Always think about social media is it's a place where you're portraying your best life. You're not going to go on and tell your worst story about how terrible everything is. It's not how people use it. So if people use that like as individuals, businesses are using it for the same way. They're not going to put on a story about how they've just delivered the world's worst piece of customer service. That's not something that a business is. So ignore it, really. Just focus on what you're good at and building that.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Okay, so is SEO really worth the time and investment for a small business?
Yes, but it can be hugely expensive to outsource early doors. So if you want to do some SEO yourself, I'd say start with 5 hours a month and consistently do it. Dedicate 5 hours a month of your time. And there are loads of tools within Google's training that will help you understand what's going to be most effective for you to do. So there's all sorts of platforms in Google's back end, and the Google Digital Garage is a really good place to start. They have like an SEO fundamentals that you can like pick up and start with. So yeah.
Yeah, and interesting, so a lot of people always think SEO and they just think about their own individual website. They don't actually think around about all the other sort of platforms that link into that website, definitely. Or link into, or where they might have been mentioned somewhere else. They don't think about SEO. It's
online search, so it's not just your website. It is your social media platforms. It is the articles. It is the other people that have recommended you. It's everything. It's your online presence.
Super. So how do I know if my marketing is actually working?
Data. I mean, I sold advertising for the Sheffield Star. The only thing I could say to you is, so we average 100,000 copies. So that's potentially 100,000 people seeing your ad. That was it. That was the only piece of guarantee I could give anybody. Whereas all of that data that exists online tells you how many people saw it, how many people clicked on it, whether that resulted in enquiries. It's really easy to follow it. So if you do spend a load of money or a load of time doing something and it has no impact, or it has the opposite effect to what, you know, that you either did it wrong or it's not the platform for you, so you move on. But always read the data. Always, don't just go, or just do it again. Read the data and then move it forward.
Okay, super. Okay, final question now. What is the biggest mistake that you see small businesses making when it comes to their marketing?
I'd say it's inconsistency. You'll get people that will be like really on it for 3 weeks and then just disappear for like 3 months because they're busy. They're busy running their business. But the message that can then send out is that, oh, well, I thought are they even still around? I've not seen them post anything. If you're going to start something, keep it going. You can't just do something once a year. It doesn't work.
I think as well, when things aren't particularly going well, a lot of people tend to cut the marketing first.
I'm always the one to lose the job first. Always. When COVID hit, literally everything just got turned off. And why wouldn't it be? It was a really, really difficult time. And I've been in places where I've been made redundant. Usually recessions result in marketing spend being reduced. And it is the industry that's one of the first industries to see and feel a decline. And that's understandable. I think that will always be the case. But the businesses that I do see that kind of buck the trend are the ones that go, there are still customers there. They are still expecting to hear from me. It's a risk, of course it is, because if you've got massive bills coming in and you've not got your customers buying like they would do normally, you look for places where you can trim the fat, and marketing is nearly always one of those places. But it is about being brave, I think, sometimes.
And I think as well, even when times are tough, whether it's the economy, whether it's your individual business, the last thing really you should do is cut the marketing, because essentially you need to keep those sales coming in, whether they're one-off sales or regular, consistent clients. And, actually when the world reopens, or when the economy rights itself, and when, the conflicts are over and things start to feel like they're getting back to normal, you need to be the first person on that person's mind when they're looking for that product or service. And the only way to achieve that is to have that consistent marketing output.
And you have to think there's always, some of your customers are always going to buy what you have to sell. Not everybody just stops buying things immediately. Somebody will always want what you have. So how do they know to buy it from you if you don't tell them that it's there?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. I hope you enjoyed our video podcast. If you've got any questions or need any support for marketing, please feel free to reach out to Abby at valleymarketing.co.uk. You can also reach out to us using the links attached to this video. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you for the next one of Business Made Simple by Hayley Cosolu.